So we're into our last stretch today, and it is a longish stretch. It's 4 speakers, but it's going to be phenomenal. We've got another Steve. Remember we had a Stephen after lunch yesterday? Well, we've got a Stephen after lunch today. That was well worked out, and I am going to ask, we're going to do a draw now quickly for a goodie bag from Auto in General. Do you want to take out a name there, Michelle? Will you? Yeah, please, if you don't mind.
Sharon King.
There you go, Sharon. Well done. So, I mean, I have no favorite speakers. Everybody that's been here has been awesome, and I think you'll all agree with that. But I always look forward to hearing Stephen de Villiers Graaf as well. He always just brings a totally different context to the things that we talk about. So without any further ado, Stephen, welcome.
Back in black, yeah, makes me kind of feel like Tony Stark. Next year, Iron Man suit through the ceiling. That'd be much better. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so no pressure. The second Stephen after lunch. Wow. It's like going to hide behind the curtains there and kind of look out. Yeah, so what am I going to be talking about today? Curate the space, curate your space. So just by way of a little bit of introduction, Stephen de Villiers Graaf. I'm the managing director of Gravity Works. We're part of the Adaptivist group. So we've been around for about 4 years. We got acquired by Adaptivist about 2 years ago. It's one of those things where you've kind of got to relearn being part of a bigger machine. So we created Gravity. So we all, like the 3 founders, we all came from consulting backgrounds. We all had worked for big consultancies. We'd worked for big clients, and we got this a space where we were like, we want to create a space where people can thrive, where people can be who they're meant to be, where they can really authentically step into their space. And we realized we weren't going to find that anywhere else, so we had to make the space ourselves. Yeah, ourselves. So we put Gravity Works together. It's been a wild and crazy ride so far, and some of the thoughts that have kind of popped into my head over the last 4 years kind of made it into this presentation. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Probably is a little bit different. I'm not going to mention any words like agility and things like that. It's all pretty much about people and how weird our wonderful little strange ecosystems can be. So yeah, I think let's start with this. Reality is made up of circles. Reality is made up of circles. We tend to think in straight lines, by Peter Sanger. So I kind of found this quote while working on a masterclass for ideation and design thinking, which is definitely one of the most non-linear things you can actually lean into. And I was like, wow, this just really, really resonated with me. So I was thinking about like a whole bunch of the creative processes that, as a consultancy, that we lean into like on a day-to-day basis. But we're pretty much we're driven by creative thoughts. And I was thinking about stuff that I'm involved in, like so sorry, Miles, I've also written a book. Everyone's written a book. Mine's not about anything agile or transformation and stuff like that. I wrote a dark fantasy. But the creative process itself is non-linear. It's inherently messy. It's something that blindsides you on occasion. Things jump out of the dark, which is really cool. It's a collection of like dead ends, of loops within loops, and these things kind of like they surprise you. So it was like one of those glorious epiphanies is where you look at something like this that's not quite related, and you go, wait a minute, there's a connection here. And you start to connect things that don't quite seem connected on the surface. And that creative process and that nonlinear process is pretty much like, I felt like, wait a minute, this is kind of like leadership. Like leadership's kind of the same thing. Like it's really difficult to lead in this like a straight line. Like point A very rarely leads to point B. It's messy. It's difficult. And to be quite honest, like, I'm standing up here today talking about talking about leadership, and I'm going to talk about the currencies that you can invest in as a leader. And quite honestly, I'm finding it difficult. Like the last couple of months, like I've been finding it difficult, and it's like, wow, it's almost like you should have like a bank account that you need to build up these currencies. And like, how do you do that? And like, it's not easy. Anyway, that quote was basically the whole beginning point of this thought process. So, like, what is the space that we have created and the space that we need to curate, and how do we do that? So, what are the things that go into this process? Okay, so we don't learn, grow, or adapt in neat straight lines, unfortunately. It really would be nice if it was this beautiful, linear, clean progression. We just walk from point A to point B to point C to point D and just like grow. It just unfortunately doesn't work that way. Well, it hasn't worked out that way for me. And we're in environments that are just starting to pick up speed as well. So we're sitting with these messy, nonlinear processes, messy, nonlinear ways of learning and progressing and growing as individuals and as teams. And it's becoming more and more important that we start to lean into this, start to accept this. So this is presenting like a massive challenge to leaders. So we start to think about, as a leader, I can't be expected to know everything. Like, there's going to be situations where, as a leader, I'm not going to be the brightest person in the room. I'm not going to know everything. I'm not going to be able to give advice from an expert point of view. So that presents a challenge to a leader. Like, how do you lead in that situation? So interestingly enough, I was lucky enough to have that lesson really early in my career. I got the opportunity to become a dev manager. And at the time, the team that I was leading, they were, I think the lowest qualification was like a master's in mathematics. Now I have like severe trouble counting beyond like 4. So how do I lead in a situation like that where these guys are a hell of a lot brighter than me, a hell of a lot more talented? And we're working in an environment where we're working on performance and attribution software for investment software applications. And the people that are using our software have got like $1 trillion under asset management. And it's like, no pressure. So how do I lead in that space? I'm leading, or I'm supposed to lead, a whole bunch of really, really bright, talented, incredibly awesome, motivated, focused people. And I can't lead from an expert point of view. So I've got to find a different way to lead. I can't also be expected to lead at all times. Like, we think about situational leadership, and one of the best examples in that space is SEALs, the SEALs, the Navy SEALs. So one of the key principles that they have is who can lead should lead. And when they go into combat or they go into an active situation, what they do is very, very swiftly decide who is in the best situation to lead. So the person with the most information is the person who should lead. So move the decisions to the information. So given those two situations where you either can't lead from an expert point of view, where you're leading a team that is vastly more talented than you, I must say, once the light bulb goes on, you actually realize that's absolutely fantastic. When you're leading a really, really talented team that are all brighter than you, just don't get into conversations over coffee. You give them nosebleed because you don't understand what they're saying. You really don't. It's like, what do you think about that, Steve? I'll get back to you. I've got to take a phone call. Just get out of the room. And when you also realize that you're not expected to lead at all times, you've got to start thinking about, well, what can I do? How do I lead? And the big light bulb moment for me there was, what I can do is I can create a space where these really talented, really focused, really intelligent people can thrive. That's what I can do. So what do I need to put in place where they can be the absolute best versions of themselves? Unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. So you can create that space. You can create this beautiful space where they are really switched on. They've got their North Star. They're on a vector that's really going to be successful. But unfortunately, once again, we are dealing with human systems, and human systems don't behave logically, they don't behave predictably, they're messy, they do things that we don't expect. So what we need to do is we need to not only create our space or create the space, we need to curate that space for them to continue to thrive. And when I was thinking about like this whole concept about curating the space, I thought, well, what does curation actually mean? And like, you know, being like a bit of a creative writer, do a bit of art, I was thinking, one of the really cool things that I'd love to do at some point is like curate an art gallery. So when you think about like the complexity of curating an art gallery, you can just see exactly how that's going to pan out. You get all the stuff that you really dig, you put it up on the walls and you go, God, this is amazing. And someone walks in and goes, Steve, this thing just touches my soul. And you go, oh, it's fantastic, it's great. Another person walks in, they go, I don't understand what you put on the walls. Like, what the hell is this crap? And that's what curation is all about. You're not going to hit the mark every time. It's a moving target. You have to rethink it and rejig it and polish it and change it and create a space that can adapt and can change as necessary. Thinking about that personal development thing, why isn't it not a linear progression? So the thing is, we are a collection of a whole bunch of things. So the convergence and divergence of ideas, experiences, those absolute light bulb moments that we get. I mean, I'm pretty sure every one of you's had one of those moments. You get up in the morning, you're in the shower, and you go, oh my God, wow, and everything just falls into place. You can't wait to get into the office and go, look here, amazing. Providence, karma, with this healthy, crazy mess of stuff that happens to us, and it affects us all the time. And we are built and change and grow and morph based on all of that. And like, it's really actually quite cool. When you just take a look at that, it's like this, in the beginning, it's all that uncertainty. There's like basically an emergence of some sort of pattern. You're looking at it, you're going, maybe this connects to that. You start to get insights, and slowly over time, this starts to distill into something that looks like some form of clarity or focus. Fortunately, that little end dot over there, actually, I coined a phrase on that. It's like a myopic epiphany. It's like it lasts for exactly like 1 millisecond, and then all of a sudden, all this shit happens again, and like you just go through all it again. So the way we approach leadership needs to be able to flex. It needs to have a different blend of investments. If you think about our energy, how do we invest our energy into this investment space? Different energies, different investments. Because we kind of present it with a moving target. Because while this is us, and like we've got this mad mix of and information that's being thrown at us and wild connections and things, it's happening to everyone else as well. So you're looking at your team, and your team's busy changing. They're busy changing. They're growing. They're freaking out, tuning in, turning into the Buddha, telling you about like, you know, how downward dog every morning will align all your chakras. And like, you're just I don't really feel that. I'm going to beat your crown chakra to flat with my Mac. But the thing is, the same thing's happening to you as well. So we're in this really, really awesome space. So thinking about that space that we're dealing with, I was thinking, well, what currencies, what energies can we spend as a leader that would help curate that space, and understanding that curation is something that's ongoing, something that you're going to have to look at all the time. You can't just put the pictures up on the wall and expect everyone to lean in and go, wow, that's awesome. Well done, Steve. That's really cool. Those pictures are going to have to change. The energies that you pour in are going to have to change. And like I've said already, this isn't easy. Like where I'm personally at the moment, like I'm trying to lead my company. And I think up to this point, I think I've done a relatively good job. But there are times, and I'm in this one time at the moment where I'm feeling kind of depleted, feeling that I don't have much energy. Like how do I invest this? And with the energy that I've got, with the limited energy that I've got, where do I put this energy? because I can't put it everywhere. I just simply don't have enough. There are days when I've got ample energy. I can pour everything in and everything is amazing. But quite honestly, at this point in time, I'm not feeling that. So I have to be really careful about what I do and how I invest my limited energy. Like, you've got to be careful and careful. So thinking about those three currencies. So the first one, the currency of care. And thinking about, just you look at yourself and you go, okay, some days are really easy, some days are not quite that easy. Some days you have to drag yourself out of bed. Some days you need to crowbar to get yourself out of bed. This happens with everyone in your care as well. So as a leader, you have people in your care, and you need to be mindful of that. And one of the things that landed with me really strongly, like one thing that I really don't like is this myth of, the mythical work-life balance. There is no such thing as a work-life balance. I'm sorry, it just doesn't exist. We don't check our lives in at the door when we walk into the building. Like, it'd be lovely. Like, you wake up in the morning and you feel like you've been stepped on by an elephant and you've got absolutely no energy, and you walk in the door and suddenly you can just perform. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. Like, we don't check what's happening to us at the door when we walk in. So as a leader, we can't expect anyone in our care to do that. There is no work-life balance. There is just life. So with your team, what do you want? Do you want whole people, or do you want that tiny little subset of the person that you hired to do a very specific role? And I think that's very limiting, because the whole people part is so much more interesting, and there's so much more potential there. So thinking about that, we don't want to miss out on that. So think about no work-life balance. It's just life. So I saw a really cool quote by Jackie Chan. He said, sometimes a single act of kindness can change the trajectory of a person's life. Sorry. And when you experience that, sorry. When someone is kind enough to do that for you, there's something that as a leader, you realize how essential that is to do it to someone else, do it for someone else. When someone comes to you and they present you with something that is life, it's not got anything to do with work, and you've got that opportunity to create that little space, alter the trajectory of someone's life. It's like so important. It's such a tiny investment from your side, but it could be a massive investment in that person. So care is action. It's things that we do. And there's a massive correlation between being able to show that care and accept that care with building trust, being trustworthy and trusting. And the thing about trust is it's built slowly over time. And the analogy I like using when it comes to how do you, what does building trust look like? Imagine every trustworthy act that you do. You carry a jar around with you. With every trustworthy act, someone puts a marble in that jar. And over time, that jar will be full. And that takes a long time because it's a repeated action. You are repeatedly being trustworthy. Unfortunately, one untrustworthy act will empty the jar immediately. You don't just take one out, you just empty the jar. So it's one of these things that you have to really focus on building and then jealously guard. So this is like the first currency, the currency of care. Like I say, it could be a tiny investment, or tiny investment from yourself. It could be a massive investment to someone else. So the first currency that we could spend as a leader. Okay. Now this one I'm not going to get too emotional, but I kind of like this one. So the currency of curiosity. So as a writer, this is one of these things that when I chose this image, like the whole thing around that was like, imagine just walking through this doorway into another universe. And we do that really well. Like we're kind of wired for that. We're really wired to be curious, to be creative, to create spaces where people can be curious. Like we didn't start drawing pictures on cave walls by accident. It wasn't like, oh, well, I've got this paint left. What are you going to do about this? Let me draw a buffalo. No, there were messages and joy behind that. Like when we discovered fire and there was, imagine these dancing shadows in the cave. There's a rock wall there for a reason. Let's hang around while the things are outside the cave wanting to eat us and draw cool things and take pleasure in it. And if you take a look at humanity, we've done this for thousands and thousands of years. I mean, like the Egyptians built the pyramids. We'd struggle to build those nowadays. I mean, think about the curiosity there. A couple of big rocks here. Let's go and put that thing up. I was thinking about Easter Island. The Easter Island giants. I thought, well, it's probably a funny thing that happened there. You probably get like these two guys on Easter Island thinking, there's a big piece of granite over there. Why don't we go and carve out a 13.5 meter, 10-ton rock statue? But then not only that, let's stand it upright and put a 3.5-ton rock on its head and then jump in a boat and sail away before anyone figures out how we did it. It's that type of thing that kind of gets us up in the morning, this curiosity thing. It's really, really cool. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he went and said, the greater the area of my knowledge, the greater the perimeter of my ignorance. And like, I think it was Heisenberg who went and said, there are so few people who know enough to know how little we don't know, or how little we do know. And like this is I think the essence of a space that you want to build. Build those curious spaces, because if you want something that's innovative and creative and moving and changing and adapting, you need this currency of curiosity. So one of the things that helps make the space happen is your ability to experiment. And experiment, exit the perimeter. Yeah, comes from the term exit the perimeter. And one of the coolest stories I heard about or read about when it comes to experimentation was Ira Remsen, who was a chemist, and he was a young student, and he was in a class, and his professor said, right near the end of the class, they were talking about different chemical reactions, and he happened to mention that nitric acid acts upon copper. And as everyone was filing out of the class, I was like, what does act upon actually mean? I mean, okay, so you're saying there's a reaction here of some form, but what does that act upon actually mean? So being curious, he said, well, I took a coin and I put it on the desk, and I took a dropper and I put a few drops of nitric acid on the coin, and lo and behold, it most certainly did act upon the coin, because in no time at all, it started foaming. There was this green foam that started to like pour out of the coin, and it was fascinating. But then the green foam poured out onto the desk, and unbeknownst to me, the nitric acid acts upon the desk, which caused some alarm. So I picked up the coin and I threw it out the window, upon which I realized it also acts upon human fingers. So in my pain, I rubbed it on my pants and realized that nitric acid also works on my pants. Ira Remsen described that as one of the pivotal moments of his life. He said that it was the most impressive experiment that he ever engaged in because it just ignited his curiosity. And that was a simple sentence. It acts upon. And he just asked the question, what does that mean? What does acts upon mean? Yeah. Okay. Where was I now? Okay. Third one. Yeah. Third. Have I? No, I haven't. I was just clicking randomly as things were changing. I was like, oh my God. Okay. No. Okay. Currency of connection. This is also really important, and this one can also be really, really difficult. So if you think about curating a space, creating a space and curating a space, this is all about connection. It's all about human connection. Everything that happens, every success that we have, everything that happens within our spaces are how we connect with each other. How strong is that connection? Is that connection reciprocal? Every action and reaction is result of a human connection. So one of the themes that's been popping up quite a bit over the last 2 days is like the theme of silos. And like generally the opinion is that silos are bad. Now it depends on how you look at a silo. So are you looking at the silo as a large concrete cylindrical object with a little door in it that's hermetically sealed? Or you're looking at a silo as more like a homogeneous network? Because that's what it is. It's just a network. It's a tightly connected network where people are kind of wearing the same t-shirt, they speak the same language, probably do the same job. But that doesn't mean that they are not connected to other homogeneous networks. The trick is to connect these things a little bit more densely. The trick is to take a look at the periphery of these networks because that's where all the novel information is. That's where all the ideas are. That's where things flow into that network. That's where things flow in and shake that network up a little bit. When you look at these networks, the other thing is that we are drawn immediately to the bright connections, the spots, like how everything is connected together. And I was having a discussion with a person who is really very interested in unpacking some of the social network theory. And the question I asked was, well, what's in the gaps? Because for me, the absence of data is the data. So what is in the gaps? Because those gaps are opportunities. You've got big, well-connected networks that should be connected a little bit better together. How do we, as leaders, connect those networks more effectively? Because that's where the novel data is. That's where the ideas are. That's where all the concepts that could benefit both sides of that connection live. The other thing as well is because we're dealing with human systems here, sometimes those gaps, those dark spaces between the networks, that data can be pain, can be loneliness, can be disempowerment, exclusion, marginalization, stagnation, longing. So when we look into those dark spaces, we've got to be really careful, really mindful that sometimes those connections are not there because of not just the fact that they're not connected. It's because of very, very human challenges. One of the most important things, like I talk about spending the currencies of care, of connection, of curiosity. And the common denominator in all of that is what I call the glue. And that's basically you. Like you're there as a leader. You're holding this together. You're spending that currency. No one can be a better you than you. No one can hold that space, your space, like you can. And that's authenticity. And leadership is a choice. It's not a rank, and it's difficult. It can be absolutely amazingly fulfilling and awesome, and like you can, feel like Iron Man coming through the ceiling. And other days you can feel like, I don't know, a slug at the bottom of the ocean. It's really difficult. But I think for me, one of the key things here is in being that glue. It's like just a couple of thoughts. First of all, you can't lead anyone to a space that you're not willing to go to yourself. So that's when you get that in the back of your head, there's it's scary. It's scary and it's challenging, and it can be really, really hard. And I think one of the other things that really resonated with me and was a Hunter S. Thompson quote. And he said, "You don't find reasonable people on the top of high mountains." So I think a little bit of madness, a little bit of, this is called a madness. A little bit of madness goes a long way. It's not an easy job. It's not an easy space to be in. But being a little bit less than completely sane is probably a good idea. But that's my ideas around curating the space. The currencies that I think we should be cultivating and building and spending to make spaces rich and richer, and focusing on creating spaces where people can thrive. It's not easy, and it's a hell of a responsibility. So I hope I left you guys with a few ideas, and questions, quotes, quibbles, and queries.
Thing's gone off again. I suppose we've got time for one question. If anybody would like to ask Stephen a question. Okay. Well, thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, Mark.
Always such a pleasure to have you on board, and thanks very much for being so authentic yourself in your presentation. It was really good.
Thanks, Mark.
You.
Cheers.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.